Howdy folks, Mitchell Kuhn here with Wisdom Financial, back to tell you what's going on in the world and give you some perspective on some historic events. So we had the huge surprise of Mr. Donald Trump winning the presidency. We'll be talking about a lot of the implications of that, and we had a even bigger surprise with the comeback of the New England Patriots with Mr. Tom Brady. So definitely a season of surprises here. So let's dive into the economic impact of Donald Trump's policies. Now, Mr. Trump is a very good salesperson. He's very good at focusing on the benefits of whatever it is he wants to convince people to do. And sometimes, as most salespeople do, they will leave out some of the downsides and maybe the negative implications of whatever the solution is they're trying to provide. So for lots of people, the election of Mr. Trump has really inspired some new optimism in the American economy. Optimism is the highest it's been since after the 2008 financial crisis. And there's great hope that having a businessman at the helm to guide the country is going to bring us to more prosperous times and make some decisions that make more sense economically and financially. So I'd like to help you understand how his plans to revitalize the American economy are very similar to things that have been tried in the past. And history does repeat itself. And the times we're living in today are really no different at all. So for this article, I'm going to focus on the idea of bringing American jobs back from overseas and what that process is going to look like and some of the pain and the transition that comes along the ways. So interestingly, in the United States, we were facing a very similar challenge back in the late 1920s. As transportation technology advanced and we developed into a more global economy, we also saw a massive expansion of global trade. So it became much more cost effective to purchase certain goods from overseas rather than from the local manufacturers who had a higher cost of production. So the benefit to the American people was that they had an increased standard of living because now they're able to buy all types of different goods and food products at a much lower cost by importing them. The downside was that there was some impact on those local producers and farmers. So the country, as they're going through this transition, we had the 1928 presidential election with Herbert Hoover, and he pledged to help the struggling farmers by raising tariffs on agricultural products. And all a tariff is a tax on goods that are imported to the United States. So Herbert Hoover promised these things in order to garner votes from the beleaguered farmers and to help them increase their income from selling their goods to American citizens. So as an example, if sugar was 20% less expensive to import than buy locally, if there was a 25% tax or tariff levied on foreign sugar, then it would now be 5% more expensive to buy the foreign sugar compared to the locally produced sugar. So what does this do? Well, it's good for the U.S. farmer because his goods are now the best price available. Once the word spread about how these farmers were going to get this subsidy that Mr. Hoover was promoting during his election campaign, many other special interest groups came over and grabbed onto this and said, hey, we want some tariffs for our products too. Our people need help as well. And so this tariff grew from just agricultural products to thousands of products all across the U.S. economy. And as we look back, there were really some disastrous consequences for global trade when this tariff took effect. Now, there was a lot of different things that caused the Great Depression, but many historians and economists believe that this was a significant impact that exacerbated the problems we were dealing with. So tariffs can create a chain reaction of retaliatory actions from other countries. So another country says, well, you're going to tax our sugar 25%. Fine, we're not going to buy your cars. We're not going to buy whatever it is you're making. So as global trade slows down, U.S. manufacturers are forced to buy American products because now they're cheaper because the foreign products are taxed so much. That's good, right? Well, it's good for the U.S. workers that have jobs, but it's painful for the consumer that now has to pay $3,000 for their flat screen TV, whereas if you built it overseas, it would have cost $1,000. Now, every worker who's going to get a job is also a consumer. So even though they may have a new job or there's higher wages than before, their cost of living is going to go up. So according to the OECD, the average American wage was just shy of $60,000 in 2015, about $58,000, versus $14,800 for a Mexican worker. So that's a 400% increase in cost to hire an American versus someone working in Mexico. That's a huge difference. So if you're a manufacturer building a product, a lot of your cost is labor cost. And it's no wonder that companies like Carrier want to manufacture their air conditioners in Mexico and not the good old US of A. I mean, setting aside, patriotism and loyalty to your country, for them, it's just about dollars and cents. They can cut their labor costs by 75% by sending certain jobs overseas. So because the standard of living in the US is so much higher and the cost of living is so much greater, we're always going to have this push to send certain manufacturing jobs and certain products overseas, and it's going to be very difficult to overcome that. Now, don't get me wrong, America consuming its own goods and being self-sufficient is really a very wise course for the long run. The more self-sufficient and self-sustaining a country is, the more stable they're going to be in a lot of ways. But what Mr. Trump really didn't fully explain is how painful it's going to be to make this transition. To get these good things we want, there's going to be a cost to get those. There's no free lunch. For decades, we've reaped the benefits of this low-cost overseas production and consuming these low-cost goods. But now we're starting to suffer from the loss of jobs created that were shipped overseas. So the higher income, more skilled workers are really benefiting from this low-cost, reduced cost of living, but the people on the lower end of the pay scale are really suffering because now their jobs are being shipped out of here. So if we bring these jobs back, the standard of living in the US is going to go down. So yes, there's going to be more jobs for lower income people, but everyone's cost of living is going to go up. When you start, this is just a well-known economic history, economic proven facts over time, things that we study in our finance degrees when I studied at SMU. This has happened to many different countries, is that inflation goes up dramatically when you shift from low-cost overseas products to domestically produced products that cost much, much more. So inflation is already a lot higher than what the government CPI is reporting. I've grown quite fond of John Williams and his work on shadowstats.com. He demonstrates that if we use the same formula to calculate inflation that was used in 1980, inflation is closer to 10%, not the 2 or 3% we hear on the news. So as John explains on his website, and you can read more about it, the formula has been changed over time in order to make inflation look lower than it really is. And there's a lot of budgetary benefits to the government of doing this. They don't have to give cost of living increases as much on Social Security. Their Treasury inflation protected bonds don't have to increase the rate as much on those. So there's a lot of reasons the government is incentivized to do things to make inflation look lower than it really is. It also helps justify this easy monetary policy we've had for nearly a decade now of low interest rates and money printing. So I'm saying all of this to give you a sober perspective on the United States for the next number of years. So I agree that a lot of the things we're doing do make financial sense and they're good for the country, but you need to understand this is going to be a rocky road. It's sort of like a drug addict getting off drugs. It's a good thing to do, and his family wants him to do it, but withdrawal is really painful. And us coming off of fiscal stimulus and super low interest rates and low cost overseas products, it's going to be tough. It's kind of like, cutting up the credit cards and increasing your hours at work and moving away from home and taking on more living expenses to get a better job. Yeah, things are improving and you're maturing, but reality is going to kind of come slap you in the face, and this is going to be tough. So I want to talk to you about the two huge mistakes that I see a lot of retirees and even financial advisors making when they start building financial plans. And the first big mistake is being overly optimistic about the future. So when you have too much optimism, this leads to taking excessive risk and being caught off guard. It just kind of lulls you to sleep that things are going to keep going as they are, and the market's going to keep going up, and you just kind of keep ratcheting up the risk in your investments. And you also tend to spend a little more freely. You buy that new car, you buy a little bit bigger home, because you just feel good about where the country could potentially be heading and your personal opportunities for economic growth in the future. So when you get caught off guard, it can be really painful. And this has happened twice since the early 2000s, in the past 17 years. A lot of people were caught completely off guard when the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s. And they were caught off guard again in 2008 with the housing market crisis. It's interesting, if you go back and watch a lot of the news channels and then the YouTube videos of what was going on, people like Peter Schiff and other pundits that were saying, hey guys, the market's overvalued, we've got some problems, I'm concerned about what's happening, they were almost laughed off mainstream TV. And then years later, they were proved to be correct in their warnings. Now, what's partly discredited some of these guys is they've been saying we've got economic problems for the last 5 or 6 years. We just haven't seen the manifestation of that in the markets. So people have kind of been lulled into this complacency of, oh, everything's fine, market's growing, everything's going to be great. I also saw some really difficult situations came up when oil dropped from over $100 a barrel, dropping down to $30 starting in 2014. So when oil's at 100, you got more money to spend, your portfolio's looking great, you tend to want to invest more there. And then when it rolls over so sharply, it really is a painful adjustment. So let's learn from the past and let's not repeat these mistakes. Let's be sobered to the fact that we've got some real challenges ahead of us. We have a lot of debt, we've got high inflation, we got major turmoil going on over in Europe with Italy and Spain and France and Britain just leaving the European Union, and all these different issues. Europe's in turmoil, and that's going to bleed over to the US to some degree. So when we have this sobered perspective, we can make wise, prudent financial decisions that aren't overly optimistic and that also aren't so fearful. Because the other side of the road is to become so fearful and so scared about the future that you move all your money into gold and silver and cash and hide it in the mattress and wait for the end to come. And that's not productive either. And there's been a number of people who've done that since 2008, and their financial plans have really suffered because of that. So we have no idea when the next downturn is going to be, how long it's going to last, how bad it is, or even really when it's going to start. I mean, valuations right now of the market are the third highest in history after the Great Depression and the dot-com bust, but they were way higher in the early 2000s. So the market could have room to continue moving up before we see it come down again. But what if it is sooner than you think? Do you have the time to recover from another 30, 40, 50% loss? Can you survive that? For most people, the answer is no, and they need to do something to dial the risk down in their portfolio and have more of a prudent, balanced approach. So what do we do? Well, let me give you a couple of things that I encourage my clients to think about. Most investment portfolios today that you see advertised by the mainstream investment companies is based upon modern portfolio theory, which was developed back in the 50s by Harry Markowitz. And it basically says if I have 60% stocks and 40% bonds, diversified around the world, things are going to be okay. And those kind of portfolios, in our opinion, can have some challenges because they took pretty good hits back in 2008 and in the dot-com bust. They were down anywhere between 20 to 50% depending what you had. So there's another management style that has emerged, really become very popular since the 2008 financial crisis. And it's called tactical management. And the basic gist is that it's the opposite of buy and hold. Most retirees don't want to ride the market roller coaster down 50% again, as they did in the early 2000s and 2008. The markets may recover from the next drop, but how long is it going to take? So what tactical managers do is they take action to try and help protect your investments. Now, no manager is perfect. All you can do is look at track records and past performance and try to find someone who's did a good job. But even that's no guarantee that they're going to repeat that performance again. But the reason we think our client should at least think about it is that you've got a chance of having someone daily manage your money and protect from another market downturn. So my advice is go find at least 5 to 10 different managers and strategies to put inside of a portfolio that cover a lot of different asset classes, dividend-paying stocks, high yield bonds, government bonds, municipal bonds, whatever it is. So when you've got 10 different people that are daily actively managing your portfolio with the goal of preserving your assets and trying to capture some of the gains when they come, there's a chance you're going to do better than if you just have a 60-40 buy and hold portfolio and you just hope it doesn't go down. So I think it's something people should at least educate yourself on and see if that's an option you want to consider. Another option some of my clients really like, they're called fixed indexed annuities. A lot of folks have been burned by variable annuities and they've really got a bad rap. The fixed index ones are looking a little better right now because interest rates have jumped up. So annuities can be great if you're looking for guaranteed income from an insurance company, or you want some potential growth through tracking an index, but you don't want the downside exposure to the market. There's lots of different pros and cons to weigh when considering an annuity. They're not right for everybody. A lot of it is about peace of mind and doing something you feel comfortable with. So if you are considering a fixed index annuity, be sure to work with a professional who represents lots of different companies and who has investment options other than only annuities. So it's kind of like if you go to a doctor and they've only got one procedure for back surgery, they're always going to recommend that one procedure. So the more types of investments and diversification an advisor has, the better chance that they're going to be more of a true fiduciary and help educate you on these different investment options and why which one may fit for you. So I'd say that's the most important thing as you're out there looking for someone to help you plan for retirement. You're really looking for an educator, someone to teach you how all these things work and to help guide you in assembling them together. Because you need to understand what you're investing in. That's really the way to stay safe and not get yourself in trouble. Another topic I'm seeing coming up more and more, and I'm getting a lot of questions about, are what the industry calls quote, alternative investments. And this pretty much means anything other than publicly traded stocks and bonds. Popular options would be real estate. If you own a rent home and you're renting it out, you own an alternative asset, which I think is kind of a funny terminology. I think of that as more the norm, and going to publicly traded companies is more something a little bit different. But that's how the industry has defined this stuff. Another popular option could be private lending, loaning money to a good financially secure private business, or investing in private equity. Owning your own business is private equity. Investing in a private business that you know and understand can be one way to invest some of your money. So I'll be writing more about these type of investments in the future and how to incorporate them into your portfolios. For now, just know that they can produce much higher yield if you can deal with the lack of liquidity. So yield just means how much income do you get every year. If you have a $100,000 investment and you're getting $10,000 a year of income, that's a 10% yield. The challenge with a lot of public investments is because of all the people who make money getting that investment public and the way that it's structured, the cash flow from a dividend paying stock, for example, is pretty low. Maybe 2, 3, a really high one could be 4.5%, which usually is a lot lower than the yields you get in the private market. Now, what you're giving up by going to the private market is it's not traded on a public exchange. So you can't walk over and sell that share at a private business tomorrow. It's like, selling a home or selling a business. You got to go out and find people and get bids and decide to take the offer. So if you want that higher income, you have to manage that liquidity problem. But if you plan well for it, most wealthy, successful people have, real estate and private business ownership in their assets that they've accumulated. So if you don't want to do that yourself, there are professional managers who go out and buy groups of real estate, who loan money to private companies, who buy into private companies. And they can do that for you, and you can avoid the hassle of having to do it yourself. So this can be the part of a solution to creating an income stream in retirement when the yields in the public market are so low right now. So I read a great article that said that I think it was over 60 or 70% of people want to explore different kinds of investments with their financial advisor. So I think it's really great to pick an advisor that is willing to look outside of the box, willing to consider private investments and help you do the research to really see, does this make sense for you? How can we help minimize risk and do really good due diligence on these types of investments? And the final thing I want to talk about is minimizing your fixed expenses in retirement. No one can tell you exactly how your investments are going to perform over the next 5 to 10 years. If you have a really high amount of fixed expenses are things you have to pay every month no matter what. Your mortgage payment, your property taxes, your car payments, if you own a boat or have anything else you've borrowed money on, all your basic living expenses. Those things are hard to scale back quickly if your investments don't grow like you expect. So if you're overly optimistic and you think you're going to make 10% a year every year in retirement, you end up making 4%, and you got to start selling stuff and downsizing. The more fixed expenses you have, the harder it is. On the other hand, if you're spending money on things like travel and dining out, you can always turn those expenses off tomorrow. Just don't go to the restaurant. Don't go to Whole Foods. Go to Kroger or whatever it is. So as an example, I just got back from a nearly month-long trip through December and January where I went to England, Holland, and a couple different stops in Africa. So I kind of had a choice, right? I could have covered a year's worth of fancy car payments, or I could have taken the trip. The biggest difference is that trip I went on was a one-time expense. I'm not going to have to do that again next year if I don't want to, if it doesn't make financial sense. Whereas buying that fancy car would have been a 5-year commitment of that same expense every single month. So by spending my money on more of experiences, lifestyle things, rather than big fixed expenses, if my business slows down or if I just don't want to work as much one month, I'm not stuck with this huge monthly expense. I have a lot more flexibility. It just makes life easier when your living expenses are low relative to your income. So as you're thinking about your retirement planning and your budget, think more about, do I really need the house to be that big? Do I really need to live in this neighborhood? Could I move outside the city a little bit? Do I really have to buy a brand new car? Could I buy a 3 or 4 year old car? So there's sometimes ways you could save a lot of money on a monthly basis that really wouldn't change your quality of living very much at all. And in fact, it may go up dramatically if you take that money and repurpose it and go on some great trips or do some experiences or things that you would really enjoy with your family. So I hope these videos are giving you kind of some things to think about and help give you some perspective on retirement planning in the world and how to make your money work for you. So if you want to learn more about any of these things I'm talking about, just give me a call, write me an email. I'm happy to give you some free advice. I love to just teach people and talk to you about what I'm learning and what my clients are doing and help you make wise financial decisions. So my email address is down here below, and as well as my phone number. So give me a call, shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to help you out. So until next time.